So common cloud security mistakes when it comes to these systems, typically we'll see unhardened systems. So just misconfigurations of Linux itself, misconfigurations of actual services, those kind of things. Excessively exposed services. So this is, I mentioned ACLs before, lack of firewall, lack of the basic security controls that we would expect on-prem to be able to secure us. Those seem to be sometimes missing in an entire architecture discussion, making sure that you have your WAFs in place, database listeners. A lot of things that we come across, believe it or not, still is S3 buckets open to the public. Weak APIs, any kind of the code piece that I was talking about before, query injections, those kind of things. And how are you going to be able to test that if you don't have security people on-prem that might be able to test those things? Logging and monitoring. This is actually probably one of the biggest ones that I see as an issue when it comes to the CIS compliance. There's about like 8 or 10 different controls for cloud, AWS in particular, that focus on log monitoring, flow data, all that kind of stuff. And I typically see most customers are missing, if not most of them, all of them, in terms of the security controls. And they're fairly easy to put in place, but how do you then manage that? How do you tell whether or not something is actually alerting on something that you might have been able to catch? I talked a little bit about the common pieces, the firewall, IPS, those kind of things. And then, of course, multi-factor, which was always, I think, at least for most of the customers that we run into, we've started to figure out that MFA is needed. So making sure that you have those authentication, but then what happens to the next piece of authentication, like location-based authentication, or removing where you have the second factor, but it's not based on the token codes, those kind of things. And then just remember, all in all, when you connect the cloud to your on-prem, you are building a branch of your environment. So making sure that you have the security controls, not only from the cloud and on-prem, but what's tying those two together. If you're using site-to-site, even if you're using something like Direct Connect, where you've got a direct connection into the environment based on an ISP, those are things you have to take in consideration as well.